So today I'm going to show you how to scroll a video using GSAP in Elementor with no plugins. I'm going to show you 3 different ways how to do this. We are going to be using Elementor Pro. If you don't have Elementor Pro, then you can use Pro Elements. A link for that is going to be in the description of this video. Okay, before we get started, I do have to mention that you do have to watch this whole video through before trying this out yourself. There are going to be timestamps in this video so that you can jump back and forth to different sections that you're going to need in order to pull this off. So if yours is not working, 90% of the time, the answer is already in this video. Okay, so the first version out of the 3 that I'm going to show you is going to be this one right over here. So if I grab the scroll bar and I start scrolling down, you can see how the video is coming through on the scroll itself. And if I go down to the rest of the page, you can see that the rest of the page is there. This is pretty easy to do if you know the code. So let me show you quickly how to make the video scroll. Okay, so here's a blank page that we're going to be using. Something to do take note before you get started is in your header, just make sure that your outer container is set to a Z index of 1. I'm going to show you where to find that in the containers that we're going to build, but just bear in mind that you're going to need to set the Z index of your header to 1, and that's just to make sure that it stays above the video while it's scrolling. Okay, so let's add our first container. We're going to click the plus sign, we're going to click Flexbox, and we're going to save this container over here, scrolling downwards. In the settings of this container, if you don't see this over here, just click on the 6 dot icon over there, and these settings will appear on the left hand side. We're going to keep the layout as Flexbox because that's what we selected, with the container width, and we're going to say full width. The next thing we're going to be doing on this container is we're going to go to Advanced, and we're going to make sure the padding is set to 0. That way when we have the video, then you're not going to see any white frames on the outside. Now that we're done with that, the next thing we do, we're going to click on this plus sign over here, and we're going to add our video widget. We're going to click and drag that across until it's in the right place. We're going to let go. Now that I have this widget in place, we do have to go and get the video that we want to use for our background. There are a couple of things to note about the video you choose to use. Later in this tutorial, I'm going to show you everything that you need to know about the videos in order to get the right video for this. But for now, in this part of the tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to a page on my website. A link for that page with all the resources that I'm going to be using in this tutorial is going to be found in the description below. So when you're following along, just use those resources while you're doing this for the first time, and then after that you can use your own video with the right codecs and frame rates, which I'll explain later in this video. If you clicked on the link in the description of this tutorial, you'll get to this page over here with all the resources. If you scroll down quickly, the very first button over here is the resource that we're going to be using for this tutorial. That is going to be the falling fruit video. So I'm going to quickly click on this and then just download the video. Okay, so once you've downloaded the clip, I'm going to head over to the settings of this video widget. If you don't see the settings, on the right hand side on the top, you'll see this little pencil icon. You just click that and then the settings on the left hand side will appear. Here under source, I'm going to say that this is self-hosted. I'm going to click on choose video, and over here I'm going to upload that video that I had just downloaded from my website. I'm going to click and drag the video into this window. I'm going to let go, and then I'm just going to go and select it. Now that we have the video in place, we are going to be needing another widget. The other widget, if we click on this plus sign, it's going to be the HTML widget. Once we found the widget, we're going to click and drag that across underneath the video. We're going to let go. Now over here, we're going to put in a script. Now we're going to head back into that resource page of mine and just copy the script that we're going to be using in this HTML widget. So here underneath this button of the video we just downloaded is going to be the script that you're going to find that we're going to copy, and then we're going to paste into the HTML widget. So back in our editor, I'm going to make sure that I've selected the HTML widget. On the left hand side, I'm just going to say paste. Okay, so now we've pasted the code. There's going to be 1 or 2 settings in the video player itself we're going to edit, and there's also going to be 1 or 2 settings we're going to modify of the main container that all this is housed in. Now if I go to this video widget, I click on this pencil icon, all the settings on the left hand side, I'm going to say autoplay is no, mute is yes, and show player controls is no. You don't want to have these being shown while the video is playing. Now that I'm happy with the video widget, now we're going to click on the 6 dot icon of the main container itself. And over here, we're going to go to layout, and we're going to change the minimum height of this container. We're going to click on this pixel option, and we're going to change it to view height. And we're going to set this to about a 300. In essence, what you're doing, this is going to control the scroll length. So the higher you have this minimum height, the longer the video will play for. But for this example, all I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it at 300. You can always adjust it afterwards to the exact length that you want. Then the last couple of settings that I want to do to this container is if I head over to advanced and I come down to Z index, I want to make sure that this is a 0. Remember when I said that you must make sure the headers are 1? any content after this, you also have to make sure that it has a Z index of 1. Because otherwise the video is going to be on top of all that content. Okay, so then the last thing for me personally is, because my header is transparent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this link over here, and I'm going to set the top of the margin to -100. That way then it covers the complete top of the screen. So now that we've done that, the last thing we have to do is just click publish, and let's go see the scrolling video in action. So if I click on the scroll bar and I start scrolling down, you can see that this is now being controlled by that scroll bar. So obviously, if you just scroll normally with a mouse or a finger, this is obviously going to work as well. And there we go. That's the first way of doing this type of scroll. Something you must take note of before you start trying this yourself is, if you want other content on your page, you should do the whole page layout first before adding any of this code to this page. Elementor wasn't built for you to use a whole bunch of custom code like we did using the GSAP protocol. So you are going to struggle a little bit to build a page if you already have this in place. So do make sure that the next container at least is already been put into place before adding this code into your actual page. So just a tip, just to remember, just to help you out over there. Okay, so the second variation that I'm going to show you with this is we're going to modify the code that we had inserted into that HTML widget. Now in certain videos, depending on how you encoded it, it would be better for it to be buffered and then animated smoothly so that you can avoid a lot of stutters in the video. The whole issue of making this smooth is how you encode the video. You are going to have to play around with that. But encoding a video I'm going to show you later anyways. Okay, so now back in my resource page, if I scroll down past this first code that we had just copied, you're going to find the second option with preloading. So let's just go and copy this code now quickly. Okay, so now here back in the Elementor editor, if we go to the HTML widget and we click that, we can select all this code and remove it. The whole process of building this whole scrolling thing has stayed the same. So this example follows everything and all the settings of the old one. All we're going to do is change the code that's running the scroll. So now I'm going to go and paste that code that we had just copied from my resource page, and then we're going to click publish. So once it's published, I'm just going to head over to the front end, and you can see how it's slightly more preloaded. Okay, so here in the front end, if I grab the scroll bar and I quickly move it down just a little bit, you can see that it actually animated in just a little bit more. That's because a lot of the frames were preloaded of the video. So if I scroll it back up, you can see that it quickly went back up. Now on certain videos, this is going to help a lot. So you can see how if I scroll naturally, it'll go animated to that point and then bring it back up. The difference between this one and the next one is this one tries to factor in more frames while doing the scroll. So if you don't have a smooth scroll widget or anything else added, this is going to help make it a lot more smooth. And that's thanks to the way that I coded the whole script over here as well. There are drawbacks to using the videos versus the third option I'm going to show you. So if you're really struggling or you want something really precise, then the third option is going to be your best bet. And that's going to be great because that's the type of one that Apple uses. Okay, so the third one we're going to be using is we're going to take that video and we're going to make it into a sprite sheet. The pros to that is that this is extremely accurate. So if I keep on scrolling down to the bottom of this page, you can see everything else kick in just like that. But using this method, you can use a lot higher quality video, and it'll definitely play on all types of devices and browsers, and you're not going to have any issue whatsoever with the precision of how this works. And the added benefit is this is just one picture and you're literally taking chunks out of that because it's a sprite sheet and you're putting it into this form factor. So again, as I'm scrolling up and down, you can just see how precise that this thing is. And obviously all three different types of scrolling do have their benefits, but they also have weaknesses. And this one being is this picture is pretty large, so you do have to be wary of that. But later in the tutorial, I am going to show you how to make a sprite sheet as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to head over back into the resource page for this tutorial, and then we're going to download the sprite sheet that we're going to be using for this example. Okay, so here on the resource page, we're going to scroll down until we get to the sprite sheet. This over here is what we're going to be working with. So in order to download it, we're just going to head over to this button over here and we're just going to click on it and then download the sprite sheet. Before you upload it, I'm going to show you a problem you're going to encounter if you try to upload that sprite sheet directly into WordPress. So if I quickly go into the back end, I go into the dashboard, I go into media, and if I click and drag this over and I let go, like you'd normally would with an image file, it would be fine. But in this case, because the file size is so big, what WordPress does is it scales down the image. Now we don't want that. We want it in its proper image quality that we had set when we created the sprite image. So if I go ahead and I click on this, you're going to see that this thing is going to have an extension called scaled. So by default, everything that's over a certain size just gets scaled down by WordPress, and we're going to have to bypass that. To bypass it is pretty simple. All we have to do is we go into plugins, we're going to say add new. In the search plugins input box, what we're going to be looking for is disable big image threshold. Now the one we are looking for is this one over here with this blue icon. This thing was updated 2 years ago, but that's not really an issue because the code that they're actually using has never changed. There's never been a reason to update this plugin. At any rate, this is the one we're going to be using. So once you've installed it, all you have to do is click activate. Now that it's been installed and activated, if we head over back into media and we try to upload that file again, you'll see that the dimensions is actually a lot larger than the one that got scaled. Now we do want this original file. Once you have this file, we are going to be coming back to this window because we are going to need this URL over here for the code that I'm going to give you in this next example. Okay, so here in our Elementor editor, what we're going to do is going to add our first container, and then we're going to add an HTML widget to it. Okay, so now I'm going to add my first container. I'm going to click this plus sign, and then I'm going to click this flex box. I'm going to click on this container over here. For its content width, I'm going to set it to full width, and under advanced, I'm going to make sure that there's no padding. Again, just to make sure that this video is going across the entire screen. There are other settings here that I need to change, but one of them is going to be moving up the margin. I'm going to do that later after I've done everything that I need to, so that I can easily work with this container before it's buried underneath the header. And again, I'm just going to make sure that the Z index is going to be set at 0, so it doesn't go above anything else in this page. So up next is the HTML widget. I'm going to click on this plus sign. I'm going to look for the HTML, click and drag that across and let go. So what I'm going to do now is going to go back into my reference page, copy the code, and I'm going to paste it over here for this HTML widget. Okay, so on my reference page, what I'm looking for is this code right over here. This is for the HTML widget itself. So all I have to do is hover over here and click copy, and let's go back into Elementor. Here in Elementor, I'll make sure that my HTML widget is selected, and I'm just going to paste this code here. Now the whole reason why we're going to be using code over here instead of maybe an image or a video widget is because we need to put in 2 different containers. One is going to be our reference point, and the other is going to be the rendered final result. And unfortunately, we do need 2 containers, so this is just the easiest way to do it. But we're not done with this widget yet. Another thing that we have to put into here is we have to click on advanced. We're going to scroll down to custom CSS, and we're going to head over back again to my reference page, and we're going to copy the code from there into this custom CSS. Okay, so in order to find that code, we'll just scroll down to this next one over here. You can see this is for the custom CSS. I'm going to hover over here and I'm just going to say copy. Back in the Elementor builder, I'm just going to paste this code here. Now, if you want to adjust the height over here, it's better to be done in code. So if you see this particular attribute over here of height for 300 VH, this is the one that you must play with in order for your video to scroll exactly where you want it to be. So always come back to this particular custom CSS in order to change the view height. So do just remember doing that when doing your own SpriteSheet. And then the last thing that I'm going to be doing is just going back into this container, and then I'm just going to move the margin up underneath the header. So I'm going to click on this link so to make sure that's unlinked, and then I'm going to put a -100. Now that we have all that done, now we're going to click publish. Now obviously if you go and preview this, nothing's going to happen because we aren't done yet. So the next part we're going to do is we're going to insert some custom code. We're going to be putting a script into the header of our website. So back in my reference page for this tutorial, if I scroll past this custom CSS, you'll see the code reference for the custom code template we're going to be putting into Elementor. This is what we're going to be using, and we're going to copy this. Now remember I mentioned about that URL of that SpriteSheet. We are going to be putting it into this code. While we're over here looking at the code, it's going to be this line right over here, as you can see for the image URL. And I did put it as a comment that this is going to be the media used in WordPress. So when pasting this into the custom code, do remember that you're going to be using the URL of that SpriteSheet that you just uploaded. Okay, so in order to install the custom code, what we're going to do is going to head over to Elementor on the left hand side menu, and then we're going to go into custom code. Over here, we're going to go add new. We're going to give this a title, and then we're going to paste the code we just copied from the reference page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say publish. Then for me, I'm going to include this in the entire site. If you want to include it just into a page, do say that over here under the condition. So instead of entire site, we click singular, we say pages, and then you can give the page name to the page that you only want this to apply to. But for me in this example, I'm not going to worry about that. So once you have your condition, I'm just going to say save and close. Now remember, we're coming back to this, so don't test that other page just yet. So I'm going to head over to media. I'm going to click on that SpriteSheet that we just downloaded. I'm going to copy the URL. I'm going to close this. I'm going to go head back into Elementor, go to custom code. And this custom code we had just pasted, I'm going to click edit. And then again, and now remember this URL over here, I'm going to select what's in there already. I'm going to paste a new URL for the SpriteSheet of that page we had just created. Now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to click update. Okay, so now we have that code in place. Now we can go and preview that page. So over here, I'm going to click preview, and there's our SpriteSheet in action. So now if I go and I scroll, you can see how this thing is completely and utter under my control. It's extremely precise. So obviously I can scroll all the way down to the bottom of the SpriteSheet and I can go back up. Now this is a great one to use. It's very mobile friendly as well. It will work on absolutely any browser. The downside is that file is pretty big. Now although the code that I gave you already tries to minimizes the impact by using just a section of the SpriteSheet, it is still quite a large SpriteSheet. The reason being is that it's a complete 1080p quality over here. So it was over 10 megs big, but for this tutorial it was fine for demonstration. When you're making your own SpriteSheet, you're going to have to tone it down, compress it if you can. It also helps making sure that the video isn't too long when you're actually creating the sprites. All of that you don't have to worry about yet, because that's going to be part of encoding the video file. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the video encoding aspect of this whole tutorial. Now I've made everything else very simple. It's truly just copy and paste and it's going to work. But this next part is going to be a little bit tricky. The whole trick to making this work properly is to encode the video correctly. Now this is going to be trial and error depending on the video you're using. There's no one fits all solution here. But everything else I've completely ironed out, and this is the one that you're going to have to play around with to best fit your needs of your project. So in this part of the tutorial, I'm going to be showing you one of the tools you should use to encode your video, as well as how to create a SpriteSheet. But the first thing that you have to do before you even start that is make sure that your video is not too long. Something like 3-4 seconds is great. 8-9 seconds is kind of pushing it already. And if you need to have something even longer than that, then you're not going to have a smooth scroll in any of these type of tutorials. There's just too many working parts, and there's going to be a conflict somewhere with a video file that large within the WordPress environment. So remember, just keep your video as short as possible just for that page to give the effect. So let's get into the video encoding aspect. Okay, so now for the video encoding. Once you've actually selected the video that you want to use for the scrolling background, the thing you're going to have to do next is encode it properly. So in order to do that, we're going to head over back into my resource page, and I'm going to show you where to download the FFmpeg library that we're going to be using to encode this video. Here on the resource page, we're going to keep scrolling down. Here under part 3, this is the video encoding that we're going to be doing. First, we're going to have to download the FFmpeg library. It's going to redirect to the actual website itself. Here on this page, I'm going to select Windows. For the Windows download files, I'm going to click the second one. It's going to take us to GitHub. Over here in GitHub, you can go and download the one that's appropriate to you. For me, it's just one for Windows. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to download it quick. Okay, so now that it's been downloaded, what I'm going to do is just extract it quickly. Okay, so now that it's been extracted, what we're going to do is we're going to take the video that we want to use for our video background, and we're going to put it into the bin file of this FFmpeg folder. So to do that, we're just going to take this video file, we're going to say cut, and then we're going to go into FFmpeg, we're going to go into the bin, and we're going to paste it over here. Now this name over here, I'm just going to change it very quickly so it's going to be easier for me to actually send the command. So just say rename. So I've renamed mine to video in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy the path of where this file is sitting on my PC. So to do that, I'm going to click on this bar over here. You can see the whole address. I'm going to say copy, and then our next step is going to be in the command prompt. So to find that, we're just going to click on start in Windows. It's going to type out CMD. Open up the command prompt, and now we are in the command prompt. Now remember that path that we just copied now? All we have to do is type CD space, and we're going to paste that path, and we're going to press enter. So now our command prompt is sitting within that folder, and our next command to encode the video is going to work out of this bin of FFmpeg. Okay, so now back in my reference page of this tutorial, here is going to be the FFmpeg command that we're going to be using to encode our video. So just remember to find that. It's under this part 3 section over here. And we are going to be changing a couple of things over here before we actually run it. So let me just explain a couple of things over here. What you have to look out for is this piece over here. You're going to have to rename it to your video file. So if it's an MP4, make sure that it's your video file name .mp4. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to set my frame rate to 30. I'm going to make sure that it's 1080p. These are the libraries I'm going to be using to encode it. If you want to change it to a different library, like say an H.264 type of codec, then you can use that one. There's a whole bunch of different libraries it already comes with, so you can go and select whichever library you want. then the preset I'm going to set to slower. So what happens there is going to process longer in order to give the best output possible at the smallest size possible. Just next spot over here just tells the program to make sure that this is playable across as many players as possible. This -T is for how long I want this video to play for. So my original video is like about 30 seconds. What I want is just the first 7 seconds. So you can change yours however like you want over here. And then this over here is going to be the output file that it's going to render to. Lots of things happening over here. I put as much as possible into a single command, so it was very easy for you just to copy paste it. Then I obviously just explain what you can change in it. So I'm going to hover over, I'm going to say copy. I'm going to go back into my command prompt. I'm going to paste. Now remember, I'm going to change the input file to the one that I have. So mine was video n.mp4. I'm going to keep everything else the same, especially the time on my particular one. And then on the output, I'm going to change this to video out. And then I'm going to press enter. So now you can see it's busy processing. It's going to go and do the first 7 seconds of the encode. Then once it's completed, you'll have the outputted file that you can use for the first 2 parts of this tutorial, where we use the actual video to sit and do the whole scrolling and using the code assigned to that. So now that it's actually outputted, let's just go back into that folder, and now you can see there's the video in that we put in. And if I click on this video out, you can see this is the one that I have chosen for my tutorial, and it's ready to go for you to upload into your WordPress website, and then you can just use your video just to use for the GSAP scrolling. Now if your video stutters for whatever reason, do play around with those settings. You're going to have to go and research a little bit more, but that's the best settings I have found to pretty much cover as many videos as I could. So next up, what I'm going to show you is how to create a sprite sheet from your video. Okay, so creating a sprite sheet is pretty easy. If you go back to my reference page that I have for this tutorial, you can see here under part 4, creating a sprite sheet. All you have to do is copy this command over here. So I'm just going to hover over and say copy. So what's happening over here before we actually go into the FFmpeg console is this is the command that we are setting. This is going to be the input file. Then the settings that we want is the 30 frames a second. We want to keep it at 1080p. And then this is going to be the file output that's going to be inside that folder. Now don't be scared when this thing gets triggered. What's going to happen is it's going to make a JPEG of every single frame. If you don't want to use every frame, you can set the FPS lower, and then obviously it'll make a much smaller sprite sheet for you to use inside the third part of the tutorial. So here back in my command prompt, remember that outputted video that we had created? It's going to be the one that I'm going to be using as a reference for this command, because it already has the first 7 seconds that I want to use for my actual scrolling sprite sheet. So I'm going to paste that command over here. Now remember, the input I have to change to that video out that I had made previously, and the rest I'm going to keep the same. Once this is actually done creating every single frame, I'm going to leave everything as is, and then I'm going to input the second command just to combine them all into a single sprite sheet. So let's just run this first part here now quick. Okay, so now that it's actually done, which is actually pretty quick, if we head over to our bin, you can see all the frames it has created that we're going to be using for our sprite sheet. So what we're going to do next, so if we head over back into my reference page, okay, now the second command that we're going to be using for creating a sprite sheet is going to be this one over here. I'm going to go and copy it. There are certain things about the second command. The first thing is this section over here for the tiles. This is the maximum that you can really go on a JPEG. Now depending on your PC, you can stretch this a little bit more, and there was definitely more frames than this that was generated in the first command. So even if you do put this in, it's going to throw out an error, but it's not an error that stops creating the file. Normally what would happen is you'd actually go and generate your frames, then you'd calculate how many rows and columns you need your sprite sheet to be. Now I definitely have more frames, so it is going to throw a little bit error saying, hey wait, there's more frames, but it doesn't matter because it still outputs the sprite sheet. If you feel that your sprite sheet is just not enough frames and you want to have more of the video, in the first command you can change this FPS to say 24 or a little bit less. Then you can use the set command to generate the sprite sheet until you're happy with the amount of sprites that you've generated for your video. But for me in this example, this is just file over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this command now and I'm going to go back into the console. Here in the console, I'm going to go and paste that command, and then all I have to do is press enter. As you can see, it did throw out an error because I just had too many sprites, but that doesn't matter because if I go over to this folder over here, there's going to be my sprite sheet that I'm going to use for the third part of the tutorial where I show you how to use the sprite sheet. So now that you have your sprite sheet, then you can follow along in the tutorial under the sprite section where I actually upload this into WordPress. Bear in mind that this thing is going to be bigger than what WordPress allows, but then again, I did cover that in that part of the tutorial. I hope you liked this video. If you have any suggestions, then just send a comment down below and let me see what I can do. Don't forget to like and subscribe because that stuff helps my channel a lot. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.